On a crisp November night in the small town of Moscow, Idaho, a sense of peace seemed to settle over the University of Idaho campus. Students were wrapping up their days, some cramming for exams, while others were winding down after a night of parties and social gatherings. The town, nestled in the rolling hills of northern Idaho, was known for its quiet charm and close-knit community. It was a place where everyone knew everyone else, and where violent crime was almost unheard of. But in the early hours of November 13th, 2022, something terrible occurred that would shatter this small town's sense of safety and leave an indelible mark on its residents. That night, 4 young students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally murdered in their off-campus house on King Road. The crime shocked not only the University of Idaho, but also the entire country. It was a heinous act that defied comprehension, and as the details began to emerge, it became clear that this was no random crime. The victims were friends who had been enjoying a typical Saturday night in a college town. Kaylee Goncalves, a senior preparing to graduate, had a promising future ahead of her. She was known for her lively spirit and her tight-knit relationship with her family. Madison Mogan, Kaylee's best friend since childhood, was a marketing major who was always seen with a smile on her face, radiating positivity wherever she went. Zana Kernodle, a junior majoring in marketing, was described by those who knew her as fiercely loyal and full of life. She was dating Ethan Chapin, a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity, who was known for his friendly demeanor and love for sports. Ethan, a triplet, was especially close to his siblings and had a bright future awaiting him. On the evening of November 12th, Kaylee and Madison went to the Corner Club, a popular bar in downtown Moscow, before stopping at a food truck for a late-night snack. They returned home around 1:45 a.m., unaware that these would be the last hours of their lives. Zana and Ethan, meanwhile, had attended a party at the Sigma Chi fraternity house. They too returned to the King Road residence around the same time. By all accounts, it was a typical Saturday night for a group of college friends, filled with laughter, drinks, and plans for the future. The following morning, at around 11:58 a.m., a 911 call was made from a phone inside the house, reporting an unconscious person. When the police arrived, they found a scene of unimaginable horror. The 4 students were dead, brutally stabbed in what appeared to be a frenzied attack. The victims had suffered multiple stab wounds, some defensive, indicating that at least some of them had tried to fight off their attacker. The coroner would later reveal that the murders likely occurred between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., while the victims were sleeping or had just awakened. The news of the murders spread rapidly, sending shockwaves through the quiet town. Residents were stunned. This was a place where people left their doors unlocked, where the biggest worries were about parking tickets and midterm exams. Now, 4 young lives had been violently snuffed out, and a killer was on the loose. The Moscow Police Department, along with the Idaho State Police and the FBI, launched an intensive investigation. Detectives worked around the clock, piecing together a timeline of events. The crime scene was meticulously combed for clues, every inch of the house examined for any evidence that could point to the killer. But the initial findings were inconclusive. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints in the snow leading to or from the house. Whoever had committed these murders had come and gone like a ghost, leaving behind little trace of their presence. For the first few days, the police were tight-lipped about their findings, releasing only limited information to the public. This lack of information fueled a wave of speculation and fear. The small town of Moscow, with its population of just over 25,000, was gripped by anxiety. Parents kept their children indoors, students refused to walk alone at night, and many residents began locking their doors for the first time in years. As the days passed with no arrests or named suspects, the pressure mounted on the police to find the person responsible for these heinous murders. Investigators began by interviewing dozens of people, friends, acquaintances, neighbors, and anyone who might have seen or heard something that night. They examined surveillance footage from the neighborhood, looking for any signs of suspicious activity. They analyzed the victims' phones, social media accounts, and digital footprints, hoping to find clues that could lead them to the killer. But the initial results were frustratingly sparse. The police received thousands of tips, many of them leading to dead ends. Rumors and misinformation spread like wildfire, with amateur detectives on social media proposing theories and identifying potential suspects. Some speculated that the killer might have been someone close to the victims, perhaps a jealous ex or a disgruntled acquaintance. Others suggested that it could have been a stranger who had fixated on the house for unknown reasons. One early theory centered around Kaylee Goncalves' claim that she believed she had a stalker. In the weeks leading up to her death, she had confided in friends and family about a feeling that someone was following her. While no formal police report had been filed, her comments added a chilling layer to the unfolding investigation. The police looked into this possibility, but no concrete evidence of a stalker emerged. Meanwhile, the victims' families were left to mourn their unimaginable losses in the glare of the media spotlight. They expressed frustration with the pace of the investigation and pleaded for more information. The community held vigils, with hundreds of students, faculty, and local residents gathering to honor the lives of Kaylee, Madison, Zana, and Ethan. The pain was palpable, but so was the sense of solidarity. This was a town determined to find answers and bring the person responsible to justice. Weeks passed, and the investigation seemed to stall. The police maintained that they were making progress, but without any arrests or named suspects, hope began to wane. The local authorities were under increasing pressure to solve the case, and for good reason. The University of Idaho was in turmoil, with students fearful for their safety, and many considering leaving campus. The once peaceful town of Moscow was now living in the shadow of a brutal, unsolved murder. But then, in a sudden turn of events, the investigation took a dramatic shift. In December 2022, law enforcement announced they had identified a person of interest, Brian Kohberger, a 28-year-old PhD student in criminology at Washington State University, located just across the state line in Pullman, Washington. Kohberger had no criminal record, but his academic focus on criminal behavior raised eyebrows. He was known to be a brilliant but socially awkward student, someone who had a keen interest in understanding the minds of criminals. Investigators began looking into Kohberger's digital footprint, examining his online activities, search history, and any connections he might have had to the victims. They also scrutinized his movements on the night of the murders, searching for anything that might place him at the scene. As they dug deeper, they found more pieces of the puzzle. Surveillance footage showed a vehicle matching the description of Kohberger's car near the crime scene around the time of the murders. This was not definitive proof, but it was enough to raise suspicions. What truly broke the case open was the DNA evidence. Forensic scientists had recovered a sample from the crime scene, a single trace that did not match any of the victims or their known associates. Through advanced genetic genealogy techniques, investigators were able to link this DNA to Kohberger's family. They then obtained a direct sample from Kohberger himself, and the match was confirmed. It was a crucial breakthrough, one that finally provided the hard evidence needed to make an arrest. On December 30th, 2022, Brian Kohberger was arrested in Pennsylvania, where he had traveled to be with his family for the holidays. The arrest was swift and coordinated, catching many by surprise. Kohberger was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. He was soon extradited to Idaho, where he would face the charges in court. The arrest of Kohberger was met with a mixture of relief and disbelief. How could a seemingly ordinary PhD student, someone studying criminology, be capable of such a brutal crime? The nation watched as details of his background began to surface. Kohberger had been a quiet but intense figure, a student who often engaged in discussions about criminal psychology and the nature of evil. Yet there had been few signs that he was anything more than a dedicated, if eccentric, scholar. As the case moved towards trial, the prosecution prepared to lay out a narrative of premeditated murder. They believed that Kohberger had carefully planned the attack, studying the victims, understanding their routines, and choosing a time when they would be most vulnerable. He had allegedly used his knowledge of criminology to evade detection, avoiding leaving behind obvious clues and attempting to cover his tracks. But his mistakes, however small, had ultimately led to his capture. The trial, set to be one of the most closely watched in recent history, promises to reveal more about what happened in the early hours of November 13th, 2022. But many questions still linger. Why did Kohberger allegedly target these 4 students? Was it an academic obsession gone wrong, a case of someone crossing a line between study and action? Or were there other, deeper motives that have yet to come to light? As the community of Moscow grapples with these questions, the town has come together in support of the victims' families. Their loss is immeasurable, and their desire for justice is strong. They seek answers, not just for themselves, but for the entire community, for the University of Idaho, and for everyone touched by this senseless act of violence. The University of Idaho murders have left a scar on this small town, a scar that will take time to heal. But the arrest of Brian Kohberger represents a step toward closure, a step toward understanding, and most importantly, a step toward justice for Kaylee, Madison, Zana, and Ethan. The road ahead is long, with a trial that will explore every detail, every motive, and every piece of evidence. As the legal process unfolds, the nation will watch closely, not just for a verdict, but for the truth. The truth about what happened in that off-campus house on King Road and why a night of promise and friendship ended in such horrific tragedy. As the legal battle begins, there remains a sense of hope among those who have waited so long for justice, a hope that the truth will come to light, that the person responsible will be held accountable, and that the memories of the victims will be honored with the dignity and respect they deserve.